All right, settle in. Grab a drink, turn down the lights, whatever you need to do, because we're about to go somewhere dark. You see that picture? Looks like a meme, right? Some wild, drunken after-party moment from Hollywood's biggest night. But it's not. What you're looking at is the exact moment the flawlessly curated illusion of fame shattered into a million pieces, live in front of 200 million people. This isn't just a story about two actresses having a meltdown. This is the story of what happens when the monster you created comes back to collect. Before we dive into this insane story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it over there? I love seeing how far this madness reaches. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and a secret so corrosive it could burn Tinseltown to the ground. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of storytelling, drop a comment saying you'd like to see a visual version of it, with characters, scenes, and the drama playing out in front of you. Your feedback decides what comes next. This story, it's only the beginning. If this video gets good love, we're turning this into a full-blown series. What you're about to hear is part 1, and trust me, by the end of it, you'll want answers. So let's go back to the 96th Aurelius Gala, the night the statues bled. The atmospheric music swells and then fades into the ambient sound of a glittering, high-end awards show. Clinking glasses, hushed chatter, the distant hum of an orchestra. ACT won the calm before the chaos. The air in the Grand Orpheum Theater wasn't just air. It was a pressurized substance, thick with the scent of Dior J'adore, seared scallops, and desperation. This was the Aurelius Gala, the apex predator of awards shows, where careers were either crowned or crucified in the space of a single breath. At table 7 sat Veronica Lane. To the world, she was Hollywood's eternal bridesmaid. 12 nominations. 12 times she had perfected the "I'm so happy for her" face, a mask of magnanimous grace sculpted by years of practice. Her silver gown, a liquid cascade of Swarovski crystals, seemed fused to her skin, a beautiful cage. Tonight, for her role as a dying astronomer in Celestial Decay, the buzz was different. This was her year. The critics said it. The algorithms predicted it. Her publicist had practically guaranteed it, his voice slick with the promise of victory. Inside Veronica's head, however, a different script was playing. A low, simmering monologue of doubt. 12 times you've sat here. 12 times you've watched someone else's dream ignite while yours turned to ash. Smile. Remember to smile. The camera is always on you. She ran a perfectly manicured thumb over the rim of her champagne flute, the crystal cool against her heated skin. Across the sprawling ballroom, at the less prestigious table 23, sat Nova Quinn. Nova was not a product of the Hollywood machine. She was a glitch in its programming. A year ago, she was a bartender in Echo Park, serving overpriced IPAs to aspiring screenwriters. Now, after a single, explosive performance in a low-budget neo-noir called Asphalt Ghost, she was an Aurelius nominee. Her look was a calculated middle finger to the gala's elegance. A vintage, ill-fitting tuxedo jacket over a ripped band t-shirt, her hair a chaotic shock of electric blue. The media called her a breath of fresh air. Veronica just called her an amateur. But there was a current that ran between them, unseen by the cameras. A static charge of shared history, buried under 2 decades of reinvention. Every so often, Veronica's gaze would snag on Nova's, and for a fleeting second, the Grand Orpheum would melt away, replaced by the damp, pine-scented air of a forest in Northern California and the faint echo of a man's voice, a voice like honey and arsenic. To become someone new, the voice would whisper in her memory, "The old you must die, completely." Nova felt the stare, too. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the garish, gold-plated centerpiece on her table. But Veronica's presence was a physical weight, pressing down on her, reminding her of mud-caked fingernails and a promise made in darkness. Nova was supposed to be the brash, fearless newcomer who didn't care about any of this. It was her brand, but inside her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this, not with her watching. Then came the category, Best Actress. The lights dimmed. A montage of the 5 nominees flickered across the giant screens. Veronica gazing at the stars, an esteemed British actress crying in the rain, a comedic legend in her first dramatic role, a French ingenue. And Nova, wild-eyed and pointing a gun, her face a canvas of raw, unvarnished fury in Asphalt Ghost. Veronica placed her hand over her heart, a gesture of humble anticipation she'd rehearsed in the mirror. Her pulse was a frantic drum against her palm. This is it. Please, God, just this once. On stage, a legendary aging actor, his face a roadmap of Hollywood history, fumbled with the crimson envelope. He smiled, a grandfatherly, reassuring smile. And the Aurelius goes, too. He paused. The pause was a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, so subtle that only someone looking for it would see. His eyes scanned the card again, as if disbelieving what he saw. The teleprompter, visible to the front rows, was blank. Veronica leaned forward, her entire being coiled into a single point of hope. The actor cleared his throat. The Aurelius goes to Nova Quinn for Asphalt Ghost. The sound in the room didn't erupt. It fractured. A collective, sharp intake of breath, 1,000 tiny gasps. For a moment there was only the stunned silence, and then a confused, scattered applause began, like rain starting to fall. Nova Quinn didn't move. Her face was a blank slate of shock, but it was Veronica who truly froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving the carefully applied blush standing out in stark, clownish relief. The "I'm so happy for her" mask didn't just crack, it disintegrated. For the first time in 20 years, the camera caught a glimpse of the woman underneath Veronica Lane, a woman staring into an abyss. The name wasn't just a surprise. It was an impossibility. It wasn't on any list. It wasn't in any of the predictions. It was wrong. ACT2, something is wrong. Chaos in Hollywood is a meticulously managed affair, but this was a new kind of chaos. Backstage in the production truck, producer Morty Feldman was turning a shade of purple that clashed violently with his headset. "What do you mean that's what the card said?" he hissed at a trembling production assistant. "The card I saw in rehearsal had Veronica Lane's name on it. The graphics package is for Lane. The music cue is for Lane." I don't know, sir," the PA stammered. "The ballots, they're delivered by the firm in a sealed case. We don't see them until they're handed to the presenter. Find the man from the firm, now." Morty slammed his fist on a console, making a dozen tiny screens jump. Something had been hijacked. His show, his perfectly orchestrated, multi-million-dollar spectacle, had been hijacked. On stage, Nova was finally moving, a puppet whose strings had just been yanked.